Hey there guys, Nerd was straight. Oh gosh, that means it stopped recording, isn't it? Hey there guys, Nerd was trading cards today. Gonna be going over my Shirayuki Deck Profile. No face king story time. This deck's story is pretty simple. Just, I built it for my cousin. He wanted a more in-game / defensive deck, and so I built him the best version of this deck that I personally find at the current moment. This deck's far less focused on its defensive capabilities, and far more trying to chain offensively, which might surprise you with, the typical idea of how Shirayuki works with its Guardian skills, which you will use on the occasion, but you're probably going to be wanting to try and save your resources for an in-game offensive, which we will get into as we go along. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the 4 copies of the new Shirayuki that counts itself as the old Shirayuki, which is amazing. That is absolutely amazing that she counts herself as the original, so everything just synergizes together. And because of this, it means that you'll be able to get all your combo plays off no problem, assuming that you're spending your resources properly. Now, for how you're going to be using her most of the time, you're mostly going to be using her for her last skill, which is once per turn Vanguard Rearguard Circle, Counterblast one when one of your units' attacks doesn't hit, give your opponent's Vanguard minus 10,000, then if she's on Vanguard, call a Shirayuki from your drop zone to an open Rearguard Circle. And while you could use her defensive Soul Blast 2 to give minus 30k to something for battle, which does come in handy at times, you're more, like I said, more often going to be saving your resources for the offensive plays and using your defensive plays very sparingly in this deck. But of course, following it up, I am playing the obvious 4 copies of the original Shirayuki. She's still good. You prefer to ride this one, but of course you still have a pretty decent on-ride to give minus 10k to your opponent, 3 of your opponent's cards for the turn whenever you ride her, as well as, of course, you're going Excel 2 in this deck, like any Excel deck ever, so you will be, of course, also drawing cards and stuff. So there's the main goal of the deck is to ride her and chain into a rearguard copy of her most of the time, but of course you can also do this to split up your resources. She only gives minus 5, and she only gives minus 10, but she gives minus 10, but she's a CB, and this is a Soul Blast 2, since her minus down power, even if she isn't Superior Call, still works on Rearguard. So learning the chain between these two to balance your resources is very, very important. Of course, if you do not ride the new Shirayuki, it really does hurt. You really got to on the next turn ride into the new one. Otherwise, you probably aren't going to be able to get this deck to function properly. With that being said, moving on to the Grade 2s. Playing 4 copies of Jokusu Girl. I'm butchering that a bit. I know so little, but still really good card. If you don't know what she does, in about that her attack does not hit, check top 7 for up to 2 Shirayukis, 1 to hand, 1 to drop. If none was added, soul charge 1, which there'll be times where even if there is ones there, just because you need the soul, you'll simply just do that and just whiff on the search, even if the Shirayuki's there, because you don't have to add them to hand. And just for the soul charge, I do that way too often, so many times, especially if I'm in the in-game trying to aggress and chain multiple Shirayukis together. Followed up is the new Snow Yokai Girl, the Surahime. Alright, well, we'll eventually get these down, because I haven't even tried to memorize their names quite yet, just their skills. So, of course, she's still very nice. When you ride her, you can call out a Shirayuki from your hand for free, as well as, if you call out the old Shirayuki, that means that you can do a Soul Blast 2 right away. Give minus 5k to their guy, and start trying to do some early game aggression. This happens off and on, but her main skill you're going to be using is her secondary skill to put her to soul and return a normal unit to your hand at the end of your turn for Vanguard Shirayuki. And of course, I forgot to mention that if you do use her on-ride skill, you will bounce the Shirayuki you called back to your hand. And if you have 1 or less in soul charge 1. And yeah, really good card, really solid card, nice 4 of in this deck without a doubt. But finishing out the Grade 2 lineup, I have 3 copies of Fushimi. Now, Fushimi here is an amazing card that does not get enough credit. Being a 14k beat stick most of the time, is very good in an Excel deck, and the fact that he on the Excel 2 will be 19. And if you give minus 10k with the new Shirayuki, that means your opponent is at 3,000 power. You're coming in from 19 on your own. That means they have to drop a 20 to be able to get through at all. And if you got either one of the other Shirayukis off, that means that they're having to guard with at least a 30k shield, and that is not fun. And if they don't have that, it's just multiple guards. But the actual main thing that makes this card so good is his on-play skill. When you ride or call him for the turn, he can attack back row units. This is very, very strong, especially if your opponent's trying to set some kind of early game plays and you don't want to give them CB, so you'll ride Fushimi and attack their back row rear guard, get your drive check, and deny them damage. This card has been so helpful in so many situations, even in the late game when you're not wanting to give your opponent damage at a certain point and wanting to control their board a little bit more. This can still go after a back row rear guard, in which case they'll have to choose to guard whether or not, which can, of course, help you as things go on. This card has been so good. I really want to bump it up to 4. I just don't know where I would put it personally. But that pretty much wraps up the grade 2s. Now moving on to the grade 1s. Got 4 of Rainy Madame. It's still a really good card. Really great. You put her to soul when any of your unit's attacks don't hit. Add Shirayuki back to your hand, either one of them, since they're the same unit. And even if there isn't one there and you just need the soul, you can just go on ahead and still shove her the soul. Now, of course, you are negging a lot in this deck from all your cards going to soul, and so you will be wanting to try to convert that soul into some form of aggression to try and make up for it in the long run. But still, being able to have your on-demand soul is very nice. But unfortunately, the next card I'm playing 4 of isn't as good. Now, Sasameyuki is a very interesting card. She has the on-ride skill to check top 7 for Shirayuki, which is nice, but her rear guard skill is once per turn when you would place a Vanguard with Shirayuki in its name Soul Charge 1. The fact that that's once per turn, and the fact that only Soul Charges 1, it only works whenever you would ride Shirayuki. Well, technically also if you stride over a Shirayuki as well, that will also trigger that, since it just says when your Shirayuki is placed on Vanguard. It makes it not so good. It's perfectly fine, but it's just that a lot of times you have to be able to call this in the early game, because you're only going to be able to typically ride once or twice in the deck before you're dead or the opponent's dead. I mean, that's just what it simply comes down to most of the time. And so sadly, this soul charge isn't that great. Of course, it will soul charge 1 for each of them on field. But the fact that you have to have it in an early game and it has to be on board is just so if it was not once per turn, or if it wasn't, or if it was a soul charge 2, or if it worked whenever you would call it or guard with your Shirayukis, that would also be perfectly fine. However, that is just simply where we're at, but we need all the soul charge we can in the deck, so there's how it goes. And then rounding up the grade 3s, I'm playing 3 of the grade 3 Searcher, 13k beater as long as there's 2 or more cards the same name on the field. There's going to be 99% of the time, as well as whenever you play check top 5 for a grade 3, add a card add it to hand if there is one, and then discard one if you wish. There's been plenty of times you'll just play this down and just see a Shirayuki in the top 5, and you'll just discard that Shirayuki so there's one and drop. I can't tell you how many times I've countlessly done that. But the final card of the grade 1s, which is what lets this deck just work, is 3 copies of Reikyo Slug. This card is so good. It's been used in Murakuma pretty much since it came out, and it's a common. It's just a really solid card. It's another card that does neg you 1, but helps you so good in the late game. So what this card does is, after in the battle it boosts something, you can put that card at the bottom of the deck and give 2 units 5k. Now, the extra 5k power is really nice, especially since you're reducing your opponent's power. The goal is to just try to, get as many attacks off while reducing your opponent's power as possible. But the main issue with the new Shirayuki is that she can only call the open rear guard, which means if you're really trying to push for that end game, you won't be able to actually truly multi-attack with her. But if this boosts something, it will open up that slot for her to then attack and then get the Shirayuki called out, as well as get the minus 10k, as well as you're giving 10k to your board. It's just a really good combo. Of course, because of this deck is very much a late game deck, and really lacks in being able to get the opponent to the end game. It's really the biggest flaw with Shirayuki, and it's really funny how like everyone was kind of freaking out when the Shirayuki was revealed, being like, "Oh, this deck's gonna be tier 1 busted. Oh no!" But it just turned out to be like a pretty okay deck overall, and when it came down to it. And then going into the grade zeros, you know, V starter, you know, it's just kind of the obligatory, hey, it's here. 4 heals, 8 crits of Airing Arts because I want to, and 4 draw PGs because Force decks are rampant, and you need these to guard their insane powers. And if you fight Poets, you need like all of them. Because Poets are like, oh, you don't have 2 to 3 PGs against me? I guess I just win. And, well, that pretty much wraps up the deck. So, comment down below what you guys think on the deck profile on this deck so far. The deck's pretty straightforward overall. It's just you gotta learn how to balance your Counterblast and your Soul Blast. There's not much I can be like, oh, well, here's the combo plays that I didn't just explain, because a lot of it is very much matchup reliant. And you really, this is not a deck that you just go oonga boonga, go in with. You have to work for your win with this deck, which is makes it really satisfying to win with to me personally. But I understand that everyone's going to like that. But this is the best build I've been able to create for Shirayuki so far. Well, that being said, I hope to see you guys later. And as always, keep playing the games you want to play and have fun.